I often talk about with clients this idea of, if you think about a triangle, and at the apex of the triangle, a lot of people put their business right at the top, and then they put their lifestyle at the bottom. And that means that their lifestyle has to support their business, meaning they have to make sacrifices within their lifestyle, relationships, their health, whatever it might be, to support the business. And I'm a big believer it should be the other way around, where your lifestyle should be at the apex, at the top of the triangle, and your business goes below that. So your business actually supports your lifestyle.
Hello and welcome to Marketing Speak. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer. It's my pleasure to have Michael Zipursky with us. He was a past guest on my other show, Get Yourself Optimized. He's the co-founder and CEO of Consulting Success, where they specialize in helping entrepreneurial consultants grow profitable, scalable, and strategic consulting businesses. He's advised organizations like the Financial Times, Dow Jones, RBC, and helped Panasonic launch new products into global markets. But more importantly, he's helped over 1,000 consultants from all over the world in over 75 industries add 6 and 7 figures to their annual revenues. Over 50,000 consultants read his weekly consulting newsletter. Michael's also the author of the Amazon bestsellers Act Now, How Successful Consultants Thrive During Chaos and Uncertainty, and the Elite Consulting Mind and the Consulting Success book. Michael, it's so great to have you on the show.
Hey, Stephan, thanks for having me, and great to be with you.
Yeah, so let's talk first of all about how you ended up focusing on the consulting world and not some other industry like, CPG or e-commerce or something like that. Why consulting?
Yeah, it's where I got started. So going back to when I was transitioning from high school into college, my cousin Sam and I, who to this day is my business partner and co-founder in Consulting Success, as well as other businesses we've had in the past, we started a company together that was focused on kind of web design and development. So this is, in the early years of all that kind of stuff. And Sam really assumed the role of doing the design, the development. I did more of the marketing, the client communications, and we didn't really know it, but that was kind of the beginnings of us starting to get into the world of consulting. And that led to another company that we created a few years after that, that was called Kankei Culture. Kankei is the Japanese word for relationship. I ended up going to Japan and opening up a branch office for that business. And that's where we work with some very large Japanese organizations, helping them to, market, communicate, and sell more effectively into English-speaking markets. And then when I returned to North America several years after that, I started another consulting business called Relogy Marketing. Relogy standing for relationship strategy. So we've always been big on this idea of the importance of relationships in business. And that was a consulting firm focused on lead generation strategies for professional services businesses. So we worked with different consulting firms, insurance companies, investment firms. The list kind of goes on. But around that time, Sam and I were sitting at a family barbecue one summer, and we were actually doing different things at that time, even though we had worked through several different businesses together over the years. And we said, we should really do something together again, but this time let's do it online, because every business that we had to that point was just, kind of brick and mortar, and we still obviously use the internet, and we were able to run the business from different places, but it was still very much connected to interacting directly with clients locally. And we wanted the ability to live and work anywhere if we so chose to. And so that's where we decided that we just start sharing our experience of building all these different consulting businesses, what worked, what didn't work, because there was a lot of things that didn't work. And there were a lot of things that, I remember feeling like I got punched in the stomach multiple times, just, the dread and wondering, like, am I cut out for this? And all those kind of imposter syndrome, just the typical stuff that any business owner goes through as you work to build a business. And so our goal with Consulting Success was to share kind of stories from the trenches and hopefully helping people to avoid the common mistakes that we had made, and at the same time to accelerate their success. So that's really how Consulting Success got started.
That's awesome. And so how do you add value to a consultant who's already maybe kind of found their stride? They have some clients, they make revenue, they make profit, but maybe they don't even realize that they're kind of the boiling frog in the pot. Like how maybe they don't even realize that they need any help whatsoever, and so they're not even problem aware, and so they're not seeking you out. How do you help somebody like that?
If they're not looking for ways to improve their business, then we probably can't help them. We tend to focus on those that have realized that they are, either they've reached a plateau or maybe things are going great, but they just know that they could go better, or they could achieve more. And if you look at any successful person or business, right, any kind of walk of life, you tend to surround yourself with an external party, whether that's a coach, a mentor, an advisor, but somebody that can help you to see things that you're likely overlooking. And so we have many clients who are running whether 6 or even 7-figure consulting businesses. They're doing well, but in many cases, they've got to where they are just based on referrals in their network, or maybe they're still charging on an hourly basis, or maybe it's been them doing all the delivery and they want to learn how to transition so they can actually build a team and make a greater impact and scale the business, all those kinds of things. So what we really do with clients who come to us who are already established is we review what they've done to this point. We get very clear on what they want to achieve, what success looks like for them, and then we'll help them put together a strategic plan and a step-by-step plan to move forward and achieve that. So, I mean, that's really what it comes down to, is that I think for all of us and all of our businesses, if we're looking for improvement, then we're not just going to get there ourselves, or we certainly maybe we could, but it's going to take us a lot longer. And so what we provide is that kind of external perspective. And because we've now done this with over 1,000 consultants and consulting firms over the years, we've seen a lot of what works and doesn't work specifically in the consulting space. And so we're able to quite often very quickly identify, big opportunities that people are just kind of sitting on right now, which kind of a pretty big impact for their business.
Mm-hmm. And having spent time in Japan and working with Japanese companies and Japanese culture, I'm guessing you're familiar with the concept of kaizen.
Of course. Yeah.
So speak about that and how that applies to a consultant or a consultancy.
Yeah, I mean, well, so really this is about continuous improvement and not just settling and becoming complacent. The moment that any business just accepts that things are good enough or okay is really the moment that you're starting to decline, even though you may not see that for several months. And so the concept of kaizen, as it applies to all businesses, and I would say is even more important from a mindset perspective, is you're always looking to make continuous improvements. And when you start to work through each kind of area of your business, so take a consulting business, there's going to be opportunities to improve around who your ideal client is. So we have clients who are already, let's say, doing $1 million or $2 million per year, but they've never really done a good analysis of their client or project profitability. And so when they go through that, all of a sudden their eyes open to, wow, we've been treating all of our clients exactly the same way, but the majority of our revenue is actually coming, or profitability is coming from a certain type of client. Well, maybe we should be adjusting our messaging and our marketing to attract more of that kind of client. Maybe we should not be working with this other kind of client. So you can go from applying the concept of kaizen to your ideal client, to your messaging and further refining that, your marketing, to how you deliver on projects. I mean, really every area of your business, you can apply this concept. And that's why it's so powerful. I think that's also what makes business enjoyable, is that there's always more to learn. There's always more to, and I don't mean more just for the sake of more, but if you view building business as an opportunity to really enjoy the journey rather than just thinking about a destination and trying to force yourself to achieve, that goal, as you work through that journey, now every challenge that comes your way actually is just an opportunity to improve. And that's something that you welcome. I know in the early days, that's not the way that I felt about it. When I encountered a challenge, it would give me pause. But, now 20 plus years of doing this has allowed me to view challenges in a very different way, in a way where, we welcome them and we look at them as only really giving us the opportunity to become even stronger.
Yeah. Powerful concept. I learned from studying Kabbalah, and it's just a general Jewish principle, is that everything's a blessing. And whether it's been revealed or not to you as a blessing, that's where we get stuck and we see it as a challenge, but it's actually a blessing that has yet to be revealed. So if we want more blessings that we recognize as blessings, and pray for more revealed blessings. So if everything is a blessing and it's just being hidden from us, or it's temporarily disguised, then we go through life in a very different way. And this idea of kaizen, or continuous improvement, when everything is already perfect and you're just looking for opportunities to reveal more light in everything that you do, it's just a different way of playing the game.
Yeah, I'd say it's much more enjoyable. I mean, Simon Sinek has the book, The Infinite Game, which I think parts of that are very, relevant to when you view the game as essentially being infinite, that it never ends. It doesn't have a clear ending. You go about your day differently. You think about the challenges that you encounter in a different way.
Yeah. So what was the biggest lesson or aha or epiphany that you got from that Infinite Game book?
I think really what we're just talking about, that most people look at business as a game, like if you think about a sports game. So it has a very clear, you have a start time, you have maybe a halftime, you have the end of the game.
Yeah, you have a scoreboard. I learned that from Keith Cunningham. If you're not paying attention to your profit and loss and your balance sheet and your cash flow projections, it's like playing football without having access to the scoreboard.
Yeah. I mean, I think the real concept or idea that I took away from that book is that you can view business in that way, where it has, again, a very clear start and a very clear kind of finish to it. But Simon's kind of argument is that that's actually not the best way to think about building a business. Instead, if you allow yourself to see that there's no ending to this business, like, why does there need to be a specific ending? And if you can open yourself up to, well, I get to create what I want, I get to mold this business in the fashion that is suitable to me and to my lifestyle and to those that I'm working with or serving, it opens up a lot more freedom to maneuver and to structure things in a way that supports what's meaningful to you. So if you're very clear on what lifestyle you want to have and what is important for you and what is meaningful for you, then you get to structure your business in a way that allows you to have that kind of lifestyle. And that's really what we're doing with many of our clients, the consultants and the firms that come to us. They're not looking to necessarily grow into $100 million companies or to go public or to achieve that. They're looking more about or thinking about, how do I build a very profitable, lucrative consulting business that allows me to make a great impact, but also to enjoy the lifestyle that I want to have. And so that's really where we spend a lot of time.
It's awesome. So let's go back to Kaizen for a minute, continuous improvement. How do you recommend folks apply Kaizen to their messaging, to their marketing, to their delivery, on client work? What does this look like, kind of tangibly?
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways to go about it, but I think one, as a starting point to offer people, it would be to just break down your business. Because I know that not everybody on here is running a consulting business, but I would just suggest break down your business into all the different functions and parts. And for a lot of businesses across industries, you're going to have a sales function or to start off, let's say a marketing function, a sales function. You're going to have a fulfillment function, an operations function, and there might be other functions as well inside of that. So if you understand what some of these categories are, then you can look at each one and start asking questions. And if you have a team, this is a great thing to talk to your team about, to find out, what are we doing well in each of these areas? And where do we have room to improve in each of these areas? And from that conversation, like I just last week actually had a quarterly meeting with some of our team in person. And we went over some of these things, and we actually look at, based on our annual goals, we start thinking about how are things going in each of these areas and how can we potentially be improving in each of these areas. And from that, you get some ideas. And then it comes down to prioritizing those ideas based on either your resources, your time, or what do you think is going to have the biggest impact. And then you make a plan to implement or to take action on those ideas. And you measure them, you talk about them, you figure out what's working, what isn't. And if that's the mindset that you have, where you're always improving and always looking for ways to improve, I think you can't help but see really great results. And the way that I talked and kind of had this conversation with our team, Stephan, before our quarterly meeting, we actually sent out to everyone and said, hey, here's a couple of things to think about before we meet in person. And one of them was, what's one thing that you feel you did really well over this last quarter? How did it impact the company? How did it impact you? So forth. And another question was, what's one thing that you feel you could improve on? And how does that impact you? How does it impact the company? What suggested actions do you have around that? And the feedback that we got from, not only did it actually make a really great conversation and a valuable one when we met, but the feedback I got from some team members was having that in advance was helpful for them to think about, how they wanted to show up and what they wanted to improve on. But I think the real opportunity for any company is, especially if you have, team members, If every person has this mindset and embraces this mindset of improvement and looking for ways to improve, if each person is making even a small improvement, right, now collectively you have, whether you have, let's say, 5 people, 10 people, 20 people, whatever it might be, so now you have, it really compounds. So it's not just one person, it's now 5 people or 20 people every quarter, making one little improvement. That now 2 quarters, 3 quarters, 4 quarters, like you can't help but make significant progress when everybody is kind of aligned around that idea. And I think that's why it's so powerful. Like we've all heard about Warren Buffett talking about the power of compounding. And I think it applies to business as well in that way.
Yeah. Great point. Now, you mentioned that everyone went around kind of the table and shared an area where something they did made an impact on them, business and so forth, and an area that they needed to improve, or they saw an area to improve upon. What was your area to improve upon that you shared?
Yeah. So one thing that we worked on, or was a goal for us in Q2, was a specific area around lead generation for one of our programs. So things are going very well for it, but there's a lot of opportunity to do even better. And we started working with an external company to test some of this stuff. And that was my responsibility. And it did not go the way that we had planned. We just did not see the results that we were expecting to see. The company and person that we have been working with is very good at what they do. They have a great track record, but for whatever reason, so far they have not been able to deliver in the way that they expected that they would, or the way that that I expected that they would as well. And so that's been, for me personally, frustrating. It's been challenging, but it doesn't mean that we give up. And so it really just means we need to keep thinking through, how do we make this work? We know that it can work. And so when I shared with the team, number one, I just let everybody know that I'm taking responsibility for this. It didn't, I expected a certain level of results, but it didn't happen. But things don't always happen. I think the main thing in this situation is, if everybody is doing their all to try and make it happen, you can't always guarantee the outcome, but you can guarantee the effort. And so that's the mindset I want all of our team to have, which is that you're not only judged just on outcomes, that those are important, but it's also the effort. So in this case, that's something that didn't work out the way that I wanted it to. I have to take responsibility for that. And, we're back at the drawing board trying to figure out how we can see better results in that specific area.
So how does that jive with the old adage to hire slow, fire fast?
I don't know if I would have done anything differently looking back. It's one of these things. And I mean, this as a marketing guy, in every business, and especially in the area of marketing, you're going to try some things that will work right away, and you're going to try many things that don't work right away. What matters at the end of the day is that you're seeing improvement. So this is an example of something that we invested in quite heavily. It did not work out the way that we wanted to, but now in that moment, it's acute. It's like that kind of sucks. Like, we didn't get the result we wanted. We made a big investment. It's unfortunate, but I also know that if we fast forward 6 months from now, or 12 months from now, or 24 months from now, we'll look back at this and go, okay, like, yeah, but look at where we are now. Like, it'll just be like a little blip in the rear view mirror. And I think also, back to what you and I were talking about earlier on in our conversation today, as a business owner, it's how you view everything. So in this one experience, or this one kind of exercise, we did not get the results that I was hoping for and that I expected. But there's other things that, as a result of this not kind of working out, one of the things that I actually mentioned or said to myself, and also to the team, or one of our team members, is, what if this doesn't work? Like, I'm planning that it will. This person is very, very accomplished. They have a great company. They have a real track record of success. They've worked with some very, very big names that a lot of people would know. But what if this doesn't work? And so even from the beginning, we started thinking about what is plan B? Is there something else that we could do? And so that's led to a whole bunch of other conversations and looking at new and different opportunities. So I think it's like, when one door closes, another door opens. And the main thing is not just to focus on, what is not working. We're going to still try and make that work, but we're also looking at, what else can we do? So at the end of the day, we'll be up ahead. We'll make the progress that we want. It's all good. It's just part of building a business.
Yeah. Have you heard the concept that 10x is easier than 2x?
Yeah. Dan Sullivan and was it Ben Hardy, right? I got that book just over here. And I think, Steve Gordon actually sent that to me. So thanks. Shout out to Steve. Very interesting concept. And to me, it makes a lot of sense. I've read about and listened to that concept before I even got the book.
Yeah, I do, but I want to actually see how that concept applies to what you were talking about here. Like, were you trying to 2x with this vendor and this person that you were working with, and maybe you needed to kind of zoom out and see more of a 10x opportunity here, or were you trying to 10x? I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So the ultimate goal of this was 10x or more. The realistic plan of what we expected to see within the first quarter, would have been more trending, let's say, towards a 2x. So if I give a little bit more detail, this is related to paid acquisition. And for us, most of our growth in our business has really been organic. It's been through the Consulting Success podcast. It's been through books that I've written. It's been through people coming to our website because they've read, like they found us, through Google. And so we've always just put a lot of content and shared, taking a long-term.
So more of an attraction strategy.
Yeah, it's like we view long-term. We want to give people a lot of value. And we know that at some point, if it makes sense for them, they're going to reach out because they're going to feel like, hey, I think this company can help me. These people can help me. And that's served us very well. But what we've also looked at doing is, as we continue to grow, is we don't want to only rely on, let's say, Google or only rely on the podcast. So we've now, we're testing new channels, and this paid acquisition channel potentially allows for significant scale once you dial it in. I mean, that's the whole idea of paid, is that when you get it to work, there's, you can just feed it more and more and more. And that's something that we haven't really done to this point at that level, although we do some paid acquisition, but this was kind of on a whole new level. So I think the thought behind it definitely was from a 10x perspective. But again, we haven't cracked that nut yet. So
are you at a point where this is paying for itself, or is it a money loser still at this point?
With a test, it's definitely losing money right now.
Are you focusing on LinkedIn advertising?
Yeah, we do. We do LinkedIn. It works well for us.
So I had terrible experience working with one of the top experts in the world on LinkedIn advertising. Not going to name him, but he came very highly recommended. He's had lots of great testimonials and case studies, and it was not successful. It was a huge money loser, not huge in the overall scheme of things. It was a 5-figure loss. We didn't even get a single lead from it. And like, what are we doing here? This is not working. So we pivoted to focusing on Facebook ads. I don't really do Facebook advertising or Google advertising at this point. We're all organic, but when we were doing Facebook advertising, we were getting much more value out of that than LinkedIn. And I've heard multiple folks tell me that, yeah, LinkedIn advertising is terrible. It's like, might as well light the money on fire. It's that bad.
Every business is unique in the sense that might not work for you, but for somebody else, it's going to work. For somebody else, Facebook will not work, and LinkedIn will, or Instagram will, or Google will. To me, again, one of these things that's very interesting about business, there is no rule, right? I mean, you can find so many exceptions, and that's part of that learning process, is being willing to invest and to test things. To figure out what works for you and your specific business and your style and your brand values. Like we've talked to some people who say, yeah, we can help you do X, but you need to really push like more hype and more big promises. And that's not something that we're comfortable doing. So it's sometimes walking a fine line with marketing to figure out marketing that will work, that will have a strong enough hook. But at the same time, for us, our brand and reputation is very important because we're playing the long-term game. It's, we've been, as a company, over a decade. We have no plans, to stop doing what we're doing. So we want to always be thinking about what's going to support the brand, and does this align with what we want to be known for and with our values.
Yeah. Well, it's good. And best of luck with this initiative. Once you crack that nut, it'll certainly give you some more diversity in your sources of leads and opportunities. That, yeah, it's important to experiment and try new things and stay nimble.
100%. That's right.
Yeah. And let's go back to the book, 10X is Easier Than 2X. Have you finished reading the book yet?
No, I have not.
Okay. So anything jump out at you from what you've consumed so far that you're like, this is really applicable to me or to my clients or to the market in general?
I think it's just, the overall concept is so powerful. So for those that aren't familiar, the idea that I've taken from it is that it's easier and more beneficial to actually think about what can 10x, so you can see 10 times the results, let's say from a business perspective, although I think you can apply this to a lot of aspects of your life as well, right? Rather than 2x. So the effort, it's in some ways, it's actually another application of this would be in our world, consultants who think, well, I need to try and land a small client first before I can land a big client. And in many cases, the amount of time, energy, effort to land a small client is the same as to land a big client. But the small client will require a lot more hand-holding. They're going to, in many cases, be a more involved client, so taking up a lot more of your time, but the compensation that you're going to get from them is going to be significantly lower. So, I think it's a great concept to look at, if we're going to do A or B, how much energy, effort, time and so forth is required for each one. Is there that much of a difference? And if one of them is going to give us a much bigger potential upside, doesn't it make sense to lean more into that? I think it's very similar to like the 80-20 concept in some ways, where, there's going to be a certain percentage, a smaller percentage of, let's say, clients, but they provide the majority of your profitability. And just taking the time to identify who they are can really be a game changer for your business.
Yeah. And the marketing channels that brought those high value clients, because that's part of the 80-20.
100%. Yeah. I mean, these kind of concepts like 80-20 or 10x over 2x, that kind of stuff. Like these are, I think, frameworks and concepts that are so powerful that once you really understand them, you can apply them in so many different areas of your business and your life. Like they change the way that you think about things.
Yeah. So let's apply this now to you, Mike. Right, as a impromptu case study. So imagine your business now as 10 times larger in revenue and in profit. What does this business look like? Are you still working in the day-to-day? Are you still doing the same thing? Have you brought in a CEO to replace you? Are you serving the same kinds of clients? Have you incorporated AI or some sort of SaaS offering into the business? Like what's it look like?
So I'm going to push back a little bit on that, Stephan, and say that I don't know if we want our business to be 10x where it is right now.
Why are you reading the book then?
Looking at possibilities, right? So a question that we know, or a topic that we've been discussing internally, and it's growth is fantastic, and we've been growing every year since we started, and we continue to grow. But what's important for us is not just growth for the sake of growth. We're looking at, yes, how do we grow top line revenue? How do we make sure that profitability follows that? But we're building a business that, again, supports the lifestyles that we want to have. And so as you continue to grow, I mean, today we have 6 full-time people. We have another 10 contractors. So, we're about 16, maybe even 17 people right now. That's a big difference from, where we were just even a few years back. So we think about, how much more can we do with our current team? Are we interested in doubling that or tripling that in terms of, number of people, also number of clients? So, there's so many different considerations, but right now our goal would not be to 10x. Like if somebody said, hey, you can 10x where you are today, we'd have to really think about that. Do we want that? And what would our roles be inside of that? What would be the positives of that? What potentially would be the negatives of that? Is there a way to work around those negatives? I think it's a great exercise. I mean, it's an exercise that I've done with clients, not necessarily with the 10x, but helping them to see, a bigger picture for their business and planning around like, what would you need to do and what would you need to have in order to support that business? And that can be a pretty eye-opening experience for people or exercise for people kind of thinking about that, creating the future org chart and starting to kind of look at what would your role be inside of that. But I don't know what that would be like, because that's not where we want to necessarily go right now.
So I want to share with you an exercise that I had just learned. I went through it myself just as an attendee, virtual attendee of this little course. It was taught by David Guillaume, who was a guest on my other podcast on Get Yourself Optimized. He's a Kabbalah teacher, part of the Kabbalah Center, and he's also a very successful entrepreneur. He's an owner of, him and his wife are owners of Mary Ruth's Organics, which is 25 million customers. It's huge. And this concept or this exercise that he did was around understanding your self-limiting beliefs that are holding you back or self-sabotaging you in your, let's say, growth mindset, or your ability to grow your business and your lifestyle and your prosperity. An example he gave was, let's say somebody is looking to grow their business, but they also have the self-limiting belief that's kind of in the back of their mind that, oh, wow, what's going to happen for me when that business grows is I'm going to have to work more, or I'm going to be more stressed out because I'm already somewhat stressed. And as more team members and more clients come on board, it makes me even more stressed. So therefore, more growth equals more stress. And so then you work towards growing, but you're also in the background self-sabotaging without even realizing it. And so identifying those limiting beliefs and laying them out on the table so that you're like, okay, now I'm clear that I'm actually working counter to my own growth and outcome that I'm after, really helps not just clarify, but remove those obstacles.
It's a great exercise. I mean, it's something that we went through. If I went back several years, before we started really building out the team, adding more coaches that we've trained that work with our clients, these are the kinds of things that we were also wondering about. Like, and I remember if I go back even more, years when we were a very small team, that was the belief that we had, like more people equals more headaches, equals more challenges. And we finally got to the point where we realized, number one, the demand was there, but number two, we wanted to make an impact. We wanted to reach more people. We wanted to help more people. And we couldn't just do that, with a small team that we had or at that time. And so that's what really drove us to start working on building the team, putting better systems, better processes. And I completely agree with that kind of sentiment or that exercise that I think oftentimes people do apply limiting beliefs. And that happens at every stage. So, as you reach stage A, you're going to have certain limiting beliefs. When you get to stage B or C, you'll have different limiting beliefs potentially. Those are always things that are kind of, I think, fun to work through and think about. But at the same time, I've also talked to many successful entrepreneurs who have looked back on a decision that they've made, in terms of growth for the sake of growth and going bigger or taking on external funding. And in some cases, people have preferred to stay small. In some cases, they want to go for an exit. So I think for me, the main thing is there's no right or wrong. We continue to grow. We continue to make investments. Things are going great, but we're also spending a lot of time. Like, the goal is not to just grow the business for the sake of growth and top line revenue. The goal is to have an optimized business that we feel really great about, that delivers great results for our clients and that continues to grow. But we're just very conscious of that and finding that right balance. That doesn't mean to say that in a year from now, we might feel completely different, whether we go smaller and a different type of client or whether we go significantly bigger with a different kind of client or a different offering. That's the beautiful thing about business, is that we all get to kind of create whatever we want. And that's really where we spend a fair bit of time talking about, internally, like, what do we want this business to stand for? And are we on the right track? Do we want to make any changes?
Is there an area or a metric that you do want to 10x the business? And so for me, just as an example, I would love to 10x my podcast reach, in particular, the number of listeners and subscribers and downloads. Yeah.
That's a great question. I mean, sure, I'd love to do the same for our podcast. So the nice thing about the podcast is I would consider that to be very leveraged, meaning that you can 10x that number. Let's say 10x of qualified, the right kinds of listeners, right? So you don't want just any kind of listener. You want likely, people that could potentially become clients or people that are really getting value from what you're offering. That's a number that in my mind, like, it doesn't take any more energy or effort for you to have 10x the number of subscribers or listeners. But if you 10x your revenue or 10x your profit or 10x, your number of clients or something else along those lines, you need to make changes inside of your business in many cases, or your business would look different. If you have 10x the revenue, your business will likely look different, and the number of people you have might be different, or the structure systems that you use might be different as well. I think the podcast one is an interesting one, and as a fellow podcaster.
Okay, so my next question is, what would be more important to you to 10x? Would it be podcast listeners or the downloads, whatever, or would it be the number of email subscribers to your weekly newsletter? Because you have 50,000 consultants on your newsletter now, right?
Yeah, we're about 50,000, and we get. Actually, I haven't checked the podcast maybe in about a month or so, but last time I checked, we were at about 60,000 downloads per month, give or take. So, yeah, which one would I want to prefer to have? That's a great question. I mean,
well, Frank Kern always would say the money's in the list.
Right. Yeah. I mean, my initial feeling would be the email list, because it's a bit more of a direct way to communicate. Whereas a podcast, if they're actually subscribers, they're likely going to be consuming your content or your podcast on a regular basis. But it's a little bit harder, I would say, to get a response or to communicate. What we found with the podcast is we definitely know that our podcast contributes to, when we look at our clients, talk to our clients, survey our clients, we know that many of them, if not most, are podcast listeners. But we can't just send them a one-to-one email, right? Or through the podcast. Like we don't know who they are. So that's where the email list, I think I'd probably prefer that. But the podcast feels to me very, very valuable.
It's like a one-on-one conversation into somebody's ear. And it's so intimate because even more than video, where you're watching some talking head or you're watching some B-roll come in and here and there, it's like they have rapt attention to you while they're going to the gym or taking their morning stroll or walking the dog. It's really intimate and it's very special. It's a special relationship. I know my listeners feel like they know me, and we've never met in person. So it's a different thing. I was curious to hear what your answer was going to be.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, because I'm a podcast listener myself. Every day when I go to the gym or I go for a run, I'm consuming podcasts, and I watch videos, but I don't watch nearly as many videos as I do in terms of consuming podcasts. I think just my attention span, if I'm at home, I'm with the kids or I'm reading a book in the evenings or whatever it might be. But the podcast is something that you can truly multitask, right? There's not that many things that you can effectively multitask, but with a podcast, you can run and you can listen, or you can, be stretching or doing weights at the gym and you can be listening at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So earlier on in the conversation, you mentioned that, some different consultants are maybe limited in different ways by perhaps charging hourly or being more of a solopreneur than leader of a team, or they're overly reliant on referrals. Let's take referrals as the example here. So somebody's very reliant on referrals. How do they take your advice and apply it so that they are no longer reliant on referrals? It's great when they get them, but all the referrals could go away and they'd still do just fine.
So, the process that we take people through is, number one, getting very clear on who their ideal client is. And that's because as you take the next steps that we'll talk about, you need to know who you truly want to speak to. You also then need to know what you stand for. Like, what do you want to be known for? And that then parlays directly into your messaging. Those two things are critical. The third is what we call just a very low-hanging fruit. Internally, we refer to it as network reactivation. And most referrals that people get, they're passive. You do great work, people refer you, introduce you, people contact you. It's great when it comes, but it's certainly not something that you can reliably and consistently scale your business, feeling certainty around. And so network reactivation is an exercise where you take an inventory of all the different people that you have a connection with in one form or another. We give our clients different templates for this to help them with it, but you just kind of think through like an inventory of who do you know. And now that you're very clear on who your true ideal client is, and it's probably not who you think it is, but when you go through a process, like it really becomes clear, and you know what you want to stand for, what you want to be known for, what your message is that's going to really get the attention of your ideal clients and speak to them. Now you can go through this network reactivation where you kind of reactivate your network, you get in front of them, you have a personal message to them, but you also let them know what you're doing and who you're looking to work with. And just that exercise by itself and kind of that activity often leads to a bunch of people saying, hey, actually we could benefit from that, or hey, you should talk to Sarah or Joe or Jennifer. And so that can be a great activity to do on a pretty regular basis. Beyond that, it comes down to, inbound and outbound. And this will depend on what stage your business is at. If you are earlier stage in your business, you're probably going to need to do a bit more outbound, meaning that you're getting clear on who the ideal client is and reaching out to them directly, just because you can see a response very quickly. But if you have a pipeline and you have a bit more time in terms of you don't need new business instantly, the inbound approach where you're focusing more on your intellectual property, your content, and putting it out there, that's a better strategy. And so that might look, there's a variety of things that you can do here, anything from a podcast to YouTube videos, to speaking in front of audiences live, or attending conferences, delivering presentations or webinars online, writing for industry publications or trade association journals or newsletters, partnering with different types of organizations, whether they are associations or software vendors, but others that serve your ideal clients.
Or masterminds, like how we met was joint venture mastermind, JVMM.
That's the interesting thing, is there's so many different paths that you can take, and you should by no means try and do all of them all at once. If somebody absolutely hates writing, well, then don't write. Fine. If maybe you enjoy speaking, or maybe you enjoy, like we had actually one client a while back who loved drawing cartoons. And so they started doing cartoons, but for their specific industry. This was a segment of technology that they focused on, and that worked for them. So don't try and compensate for your weaknesses. You want to focus on your strengths. As long as your ideal clients will consume whatever format that is that you are creating in, that's the most powerful step that you can take, which is to publish or to put your content out there, because you can demonstrate value. If you get a referral from someone, there's an exchange of value. The person that is referring you is essentially saying to the buyer, hey, you can trust this person. They do great work. If you have a conversation with a buyer, you can ask really meaningful, valuable questions that demonstrate your knowledge of the industry or the sector. And that's also a way, through asking great questions, to demonstrate value. And of course, if you do the actual work with the client, you can demonstrate value through doing the work, so the client can see that value. But how can you actually demonstrate value if you don't have any of those happening? And the best way in that scenario is through content, because I can tell you I'm really good at something, but if I just show you that I'm really good at it by writing a very detailed, valuable article, or I give a talk that blows your mind, or I'm on a podcast, whatever that might be, in whatever format it is in, I don't need to sell you on what we as a company do. You can just see that expertise coming through in the content. And so that's really what we tend to suggest that people do. But again, it depends on if they're earlier stage or a little bit later stage and more established. And then going through and figuring out what is the right channel, what is the right format for them, and then helping them to think through how do you actually do that. There's a lot of different kinds of topics that you could talk about. How do you figure out the right ones? How do you make sure you have a proper call to action? When is it the right time to have a call to action? When should you not use a call to action? A lot of variables, but that's really the process that we help people to go through, that tends to generate some very solid lead flow for them once they have it up and running. And the key word here, Stephan, is consistency. It's not about, as it's not about both yourself and myself. We're showing up on these podcasts over and over again. Like, we do what we do, not short term. We do it long term, because we know that the benefits come again through compounding and through showing up consistently. When people get excited about, I'm going to start a podcast, or I'm going to do some YouTube videos, or I'm going to write an article, and they do one or two or a couple and then stop, you're typically not going to see great value from that.
Yeah. So how reliant are you on referrals these days?
So referrals are definitely a part of our business. And I think I know from, we do a Consulting Success, we do studies where we ask thousands of consultants about how they generate their business and so on and so forth. And one of those questions is around, where do you get the majority of your business from? And for most consultants, it's still referrals, which is not surprising. We get referrals, but we don't rely on them. We've invested a lot of time, energy, focus on content. That's how we actually started Consulting Success back in the day. Even before we had anything to sell or to offer, we just were sharing our experiences through blog posts. We have the podcast, we have the YouTube channel, we have books. We do different events. I speak for different consulting associations or different groups. We have partnerships. So yeah, we're not reliant on any one channel, but we're always looking and asking ourselves, how can we generate even more referrals, and how can we get even better results from our podcast, or from our paid acquisition channels, or SEO, or whatever it might be. That's again back to our earlier conversation around kaizen, right, and kind of continuous improvement. When we find something that works, we want to try to get it working even better.
Yeah, just an out of the box idea for you. Have you ever considered founding your own association for consultants?
No. Maybe it's an idea that's kind of jumped around a little bit, but no, we have not. It's interesting because we have relationships with different associations. I was talking to one association recently, and they've been around a long time, and they have, and they're well known, but they have something like 300 or 400 members. And I was like, that's interesting, because, we have 50,000 people on our email list that are consultants. Like, we probably actually have the biggest, or one of the biggest consulting communities out there. We could probably do something like that if we want to explore it further. But so it's a great idea, not one that we've given a lot of thought to, but something that we might going forward.
Maybe one of those 10x is easier than 2x ideas. Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a Facebook group for consultants where they can all hang out and shoot the breeze?
So we have a Facebook group. We have a LinkedIn group. And I can tell you that we don't do very much with them. It's for us, social media is an area where we have a lot of opportunity to improve. Part of that is that I'm personally not big on social media. Like I'm on the different channels, but I don't really enjoy it. So we would need a dedicated person to just manage that. Facebook also is an interesting one that in speaking to many of our clients, they don't spend a great deal of time on Facebook. So yeah, it's one of these areas where it's like, yeah, we could definitely do a lot more there. And it's like everything. I mean, there's so many places where we could do better and make an improvement. Our big thing, Stephan, is always looking at, well, where's the priority right now? Where should we be focused based on what our goals are and what we want to achieve? That's where we put our focus in. We can't do everything. There's just too many opportunities for us to push all the different buttons. So we're trying to always be selective in which buttons do we want to push and which ones do we feel will actually have the biggest impact or align best, and most with our values.
Yeah. And one thing you mentioned, I know we're getting close to time here. You just mentioned really quickly in passing at the beginning of the episode, you mentioned the phrase imposter syndrome. I'm curious if you had or have currently imposter syndrome, and if you wanted to share any experiences or words of wisdom in relation.
So I'll take you back to my time in Japan. I went there to open up, as I mentioned, kind of an office for our company, Concave Culture, at that time. I was in my early to mid 20s, and I was consulting with and advising, billion-dollar organizations like Panasonic and Dow Jones and Financial Times Japan, Omron, Shimadzu, Sumitomo, like a whole bunch of just really big players. And I would go into boardrooms where I was by far the youngest person. I was, in almost all cases, the only foreigner, the only white guy amongst a bunch of Japanese people. Most of the Japanese people that were in those rooms were in their 50s, 60s, or in some cases 70s. They were much more senior in me, not only in age, but also in terms of, kind of like what they accomplished. Like just looking up, I felt inferior, was kind of how I would often feel. And that was challenging for me. I remember there was one specific situation where we had a problem with one of our clients. They were unhappy with a specific ad that we had created for them because the image in one of the ads was the same image that some other company had used. So back in those days, right, you get royalty-free kind of images, or I guess it wasn't royalty-free. We paid for the image, but just by kind of chance, some other company also used the same image, and they were very unhappy about that, which was understandable. I was living in Osaka, that's where the office was. I had to go with our partner from an ad agency up to Tokyo. So we jumped on the bullet train that morning and went up there and had a 4-hour meeting to work through this whole thing. And at the end, it was fine. Again, it showed the importance of relationships and investing in those relationships and getting everybody back on track. But I remember that feeling in kind of the pit of my stomach of like, what am I doing here? Like, it just, even though now looking back and even, probably a few months after that situation, it wasn't a big deal at all. But in that moment, it felt a bit paralyzing. It was really challenging. I remember asking myself, why am I doing this? Like, I remember I had received a 6-figure job offer back in Canada, and I had left that to continue building this business. Here I was, like, a foreigner, an outsider. Like, I didn't fit in. My Japanese language at that time still wasn't, as good. Like, I was still learning. So there's all these reasons to make me feel like I'm an imposter. Like, I don't belong. I shouldn't have a seat at this table. But the flip side of it was, Stephan, and I write about this in my book, The Elite Consulting Mind, specifically for consultants, although I've heard it applies to lots of other types of people, it's like the grass is always greener, right? So I was focusing on what I thought were my deficiencies. What I wasn't focusing on enough was the reason why I was at that table. And so I was there because these companies were looking for an advantage and an edge reaching English-speaking markets. They didn't have that capability internally, at least not at the level that they were looking to have. And that's where we had experience. That's where I could add value. And so the moment that I kind of realized that, it helped to shift to go, okay, well, there is a reason why I'm here. And I talk about this from the perspective of, like, sometimes when somebody is younger, they say, well, I'm younger and all these older people have, this experience. Well, you can also flip that and say somebody who's older looks at these younger people and goes, oh, they have all this energy, they have all this time, right? Or I remember back, this was before COVID, people would say, I'm in a big city. There's so much competition here. It's so hard to be successful. And then you talk to other people and they say, I'm in this small town in the middle of nowhere. There's no big companies near me. And so you can always choose to focus on either the positive or the negative. You can choose to focus on the opportunity or the lack of opportunity. It all depends on what you're seeing. And to me, that's really been, I think the big kind of leap when it comes to imposter syndrome is if you let all of those things weigh you down, if you put the lenses on of like, why won't this work? Or what do I not have? Or what do I lack? That's going to hold you back. But if you actually look at it and go, well, there's something that I have here that like, there's a reason why I'm here. Then, and you start seeing it as an advantage, you start seeing a lot more opportunity. Then that idea of imposter syndrome, I think, starts to fade away.
Yeah. And wouldn't it be cool if that was a divine setup, that photo that ended up being the same one that the competitor used, that wasn't random, but it was actually divinely orchestrated from above?
Yeah, I don't have the answer to that, but I remember I can tell you the photo. It was of a guy with his head in a trash bin because it was for an RFID company product, and it was the whole idea behind it was like instead of trying to find things getting lost in the trash with RFID, right? You can track the location of stuff everywhere. So the other company had used it for a completely different purpose, but yeah, I still have a memory of what that image looked like.
That's what my intuition tells me, is that was a divine setup. That photo was meant to be the same one as the one the competitor was using, so that you would have this opportunity to look inside, to self-reflect, to grow and evolve, and to see this as a valuable lesson.
I think what you're saying right there is a lesson for everybody, right? You can choose to look at any situation that you encounter and dwell on what's wrong with it, or you can look at it from a different perspective and turn it into an opportunity, or turn it into a gift, or in your words, Stephan, a blessing.
Awesome. Well, great way to end this episode. So if our listener or viewer wants to work with you, wants to learn from you and from all the wonderful resources that you've developed, the books and the podcasts and so forth, where should we send them?
Consultingsuccess.com is home to everything. So you can find about 1,000 or so free articles there on growing a consulting business. Then we have the Consulting Success podcast, the YouTube channel, books, resources, all that is there. So appreciate it. Thanks, Stephan.
Thank you. And thank you, listener. Now apply what you've learned, even if you're not in the consulting world, and make it a great week. We'll catch you in the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.